Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here. This week's episode of the Market Monday. Big shout out to Greg. I hope you like the new overlay. I actually cheated. This is the one we use for Twitch, and I thought I'd try it for a Rogue Market or Market Monday video. So big shout outs to Greg for the overlay. So first of all, I want to talk about the most interesting gain losses. We'll start doing this for series for every Market Monday going forward. This is Crush of Tentacles. If you were paying attention to the Star City Standard Open, both of the Grand Prix or all three of the Grand Prix over the weekend, I can't remember how many there were exactly, were limited. So there's not really any price changes that are going to happen because of a limited tournament. But the Standard Open in Baltimore did have a variety of decks trying to compete against the slew of Bant Company decks, and one of these decks was a blue-green Crush deck that tries to ramp into Crush of Tentacles and then beat them down with an 8/8 blue Octopus. So this card went from it was $1.50 and went all the way to $6 after this deck top 8'd, so it had a price change of 275%, which is awesome and is the exact reason I like these more bulk mythics that have. I always liked this card ever since it was spoiled. I knew there was potential, so I missed the bandwagon on this. Hopefully some more savvy people pick these up before the price increase. This is good news going into the Pro Tour, as this could easily be an archetype going forward. We'll talk about the Standard Open Baltimore and just my reasoning behind why I think that any card that has the ability to compete with Bant Company, I think is going to go up, because just people are getting sick of A, playing Bant Company, and B, playing against Bant Company. So I think we're going to see some innovation just because of people like myself and the vast majority of players. I would say it's more common for people hating the redundancy of like the top deck rather than enjoying knowing which deck is the best deck. So anyway, let's just move on to the Star City Games Standard Open, which saw, I believe it was about 45% of the decks were running Bant Company. So you could say there was 55% were not running Bant Company. That's the good news. So there's actually more decks running other archetypes besides Bant Company, but the decks that make it to day 2, there was only none of them hit double digits except for Bant Company. The next was Green White Tokens, which had 9 decks making day number 2, and only one of them actually did good, but it actually won the tournament. So we're going to look down. This is kind of a precursor of what we're going to see at the Pro Tour. Now keep in mind, the last Pro Tour was very similar to this. The Mono White Humans came out the gate swinging on week number 1 after Shadows of Innistrad was legal in Standard, and then the Bant Company started beating up on the Humans decks, and so everyone going into the Pro Tour was like, oh, Bant Company's just going to clean house. I think that at the Star City Games right before the Pro Tour, so very similar to this one, was like a 30% Bant Company in the metagame. So, and then Bant Company got crushed, absolutely crushed, no pun intended, at the Pro Tour Shadows of Innistrad by all the Languish decks, and in fact had the worst what we call conversion rate. That means how many decks that entered the scene in day number 1 actually made it into day number 2. So we might see history repeat itself because Bant Company is the big bad boy on campus, and then we'll see the decks that actually do very well against the company decks kind of farm those out. But it is called the metagame. Right now, the Languish decks do very well against Bant Company decks, but do very poor against the Spirit decks. But now these Languish decks are picking up the Lilianas, which are very good versus Spirits. And I'm kind of eating my words with Liliana, because Liliana did spike to $48 and then has gone back down to about 43-ish. And I still think that Liliana is way overvalued, as it's very hard for Mythic. It needs to see at least a 4 of in the top deck to hold a $40 price tag, and not the third or fourth deck as a 2 of or a 3 of. And we'll check that out in a second with Liliana. But let's just look at the metagame breakdown here for Star City Open Baltimore. The Green White Tokens did take it down. It was a very typical Green White Tokens, but running 3 mainboarded Tragic Arrogances, which I think is very key to beating those type of strategies. The Bant strategies, because it does leave them just with, you can actually pick their worst creature to leave them with and basically just wipes their board, and then you keep your Hangerback Walker or Archangel Avacyn, and you actually can keep a Planeswalker and anything else, or you can actually even kill your Hangerback Walker, have a ton of tokens, and keep your Archangel Avacyn, and then just finish off the game in a few turns. So Dromoka's Command and Declaration Stone continue to be really good in this format. And green-white tokens, I think, even though it did win the entire tournament, we can see if we go back to this. I mean, there was 9 green-white tokens actually made day 2, and the next one is 19th place. And then after that, none of them even made none of them even made in the top 32. So with all the decks that actually made top 32, it's look at all these banned companies, banned company, banned company, banned company, banned company, banned company. I would say 75% of this was the banned companies. So there was some interesting decks in here. This Esper Starfield was really, really cool, as it just tried to use Starfield of Nyx to get back some early stasis snares, or some of these like Lunar Force type cards. Lunar Force is really cool with Starfield Nyx because it does sack itself, and then you'll be able to get it back. And you can actually kind of lock them down. That's kind of what the combination is with this, is Lunar Force and Starfield of Nyx. Do I think Starfield is going to go up? Probably not. I mean, this had a good showing, but I'm not quite certain that this is powerful enough. It is a Languish deck, so usually Languish decks, Grasp of Darkness Languish decks are the decks that do very well against Collected Company. Transgress the Mind is probably the best card against Coco. I wouldn't be surprised to start seeing decks actually run a full package. It's terrible versus, it's okay versus Spirits, but not the greatest. But it's terrible versus humans, but it's so good versus Bant Company, because besides like Sylvan Advocate, you can basically take any card. So that's going to come out before Spellcaller. It's going to get the Reflector Mages. It's going to get the, if they're running the Tireless Trackers, Collected Companies, you hardly ever miss with Transgress the Mind versus the Bant Company. So that was an interesting deck I thought I would at least showcase. I think there's some merit to this type of deck running the Starfield of Nyx. Again, Starfield of Nyx is a mythic that could go up because of this. But I hate to invest right now in anything from Origins or Dragons, because it's just the risk is very, very high. The reward is very, very low. Even if it does win the Pro Tour, it doesn't have... The vendors are trying to get rid of these. They're not trying to stockpile. The window is very, very short before these rotate out, and we also have a Conspiracy set and a From the Vault set coming out. So I think that people, the ability for people to invest in Standard is just not worth it for vendors to invest in Origins or Dragons cards. So I think the prices of these will continue to go down until rotation, regardless, unless there's just a huge showing. So we can see the Bant Company decks are everywhere. Bant Company. Actually the most played card in the top 32 list was Sylvan Advocate, which is still kind of hovering around the $5 mark, which is kind of crazy that it's outperforming company decks. I think that the only reason that Collected Company is a more expensive is just it's the focal point. It is the namesake of the deck, and plus it also is played in Modern quite extensively. So it's a card that's going to hold its value for months and months and years to come. Company has dropped. I think it's down below $18 now. Just because, again, people are preparing for rotation. I think vendors learned their lesson about the fetch lands. If you may notice, I've talked about the fetch lands from Konzatark here quite a bit for the last, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months since they've been rotated, where I said they're a terrible, terrible investment, and they continue to fall about 25 cents per week. So you can actually see there isn't a fetch land over $20 anymore. We might go check those out in a second, but I think that we probably saw 3-4 months before fetch lands will stabilize, and then I think is the time to actually pull the trigger on them. We still even see shock lands not really going up, just a few of them like the Sacred Foundries and the Stomping Grounds, just because they're key pieces in the Zoo decks and Burn decks that are seeing really, really high play right now in the Modern format. But, I mean, Return to Ravnica rotated a long time ago, and now they're finally, it's just kind of this new age of Magic. I think the huge flux in Magic players happened during Return to Ravnica, and those sets were just printed and printed and printed and printed, and you can't really compare them to sets that were printed before Return to Ravnica. So I think that Konzatark here, when people were thinking they're going to be Zendikar fetch lands going crazy a year later after it rotated, people thought it was going to do the same with the Konzatark here fetches, but I just don't think the Modern has the demand for them. Anywho, so let's just go back. I want to actually pull up this crush. Let's talk about the crush. There is some interesting things in the deck. So again, namesake cards are the first to go up. So in this, the first huge price increase was going to be the Crush of Tentacles. But you can see that there's also another card that's a mythic that is very, very low, which is Kiora. Kiora is a $2 card at the moment, and it was a 2 of in the deck. And I actually like Kiora because it's not going anywhere. It has the ability to go up in next standard. Say that blue actually gets a lot more control type cards, and we did... Marrow did tweet that, Mark Rosewater did tweet that they do want counterspells to be relevant again in the format. That's one of the things that hasn't been relevant since Sphinx's Revelation decks during the Theros and Return to Ravnica format. But he does want to get away from draw-go type strategies. So they're going to make draw cards less powerful than before, but probably going to bring back some more of the powerful counterspells. They've tinkered and tinkered and tinkered with a bunch of 3 counterspell type spells. I mean, there's Convolute, we've had Dissipate, we've had Dissolve, there's a few of them, these Scatter to the Winds, the Exiles, I believe. We've had a bunch of these 3 mana counterspells, and none of them have really got the job done. So I think that they're going to start tinkering around with two mana cost mana or counterspells. Maybe we'll see Mana Leak come back. I highly doubt Mana Leak, but maybe we'll see like a Mana Leak light type card, or more of a situational counterspell that is actually a little bit better than, like, Horribly Awry just doesn't cut it. Neither does Negate. Negate's a good sideboard card, but it's kind of, I think Clash of Wills was a great counterspell, but it's a little bit tough once the opponent does have the mana for Clash of Wills. Plus, it a lot of times ends up being you're spending 3 mana for Clash of Wills, so it's just strictly worse than a Convolute type card. So anyway, if that's the case, if we do in Kaladesh start seeing some good counterspell type cards, I think Kiora is very, very good card for this type build. So sorry about the low resolution here on this card, but Kiora, its +1 is very interesting too, because it is a ramp type card if you do have a Mana Dork, and I don't think there is one in this deck, which is kind of crazy. They didn't put. Radiclaw Mystic was kind of the slot that we had for the 2-drop Mana Dork, and we haven't really had one, and we have Deathcap Cultivator, but it doesn't really work in this type of deck. But if we do get a 1 or a 2-drop Mana Dork, I think that the Kiora is really interesting with that too, because you go 2-drop into 4-drop into a 6-drop. So you can actually ramp into your Crush of Tentacles a little bit earlier. But with this deck, they're trying to just use like an Oath of Nissa into a Crush of Tentacles just for the surge, because you do want that 8/8 blue octopus. So yeah, again, nothing too fancy in this deck. It's just trying to clog the board with early cards. It's kind of funny. I don't know why the Noose Constrictor's in here over the Sylvan Advocate. Maybe because Noose Constrictor can actually... I just think Sylvan Advocate's a better slot there than Noose Constrictor. But, I mean, I didn't top 8 with the deck, so we'll have to wait and see what this does. I mean, there's really nothing you want. I mean, nothing gets any Madness type effect or Delirium type effect in the deck. I guess Delirium with the one of Ishkanah Graphwood, but yeah, this still the Noose Constrictor is kind of puzzling to me that they chose to play it over a card like Sylvan Advocate that I think just gets a lot more value, especially when there's Lumbering Falls in the deck. So anyway, we'll keep an eye on this deck to see if it actually starts putting up the numbers at Pro Tour. Kiora could be the card that I would suggest investing in that has the most potential of going up. I think that we've kind of missed the Crush of Tentacles spike. It's gone up at 275% increase. A Mythic as a 4 of in a deck could easily go past the $6 mark. I think $10, $12, $14 is very, very possible. So you could still see another 100% increase in the card. But yeah, I think that it's finally seeing its potential in this type of shell. So now I want to talk about the Liliana decks here. So the Liliana decks, they all got crushed in the top 8. There was 2 of them that made the top 8, and they got beat out by Bant Company. All of the Bant Companies, Green White Tokens beat out a Bant Company, and Bant Companies beat out the Abzan and Black-White control. So the first one is the Abzan control. So the Abzan control has the two of Kalitas's, so we could see Kalitas actually rebounding again. It's still, I think, it's the most powerful mythic in the entire standard format, as has the ability to exile a bunch of cards, which is so super relevant in the format with hangerback walkers. So this one does run a 3 of Liliana, and Liliana, there's not one in the sideboard. I thought this one did, but so this is just a typical control list that tries to clog the board. I have a very similar list if you want to go check back in my Splendid Reclamation deck. I was running Sylvan Advocates and the Grim Flayer just to clog up the early board, and then using cards like Languish and other Grasp of Darknesses. So very similar type list. I like Chandra over Sorin and Gideon, but this is a very similar type of strategy. Languish type decks, clog the board early, wipe the board, get out of threat. So that's what this deck is trying to do. He is running the 3 Liliana of Last Hopes that do take out the spirits and the humans quite well. I think this is the Languish's missing link is Liliana, so I'm kind of eating my words with Liliana. I still think she's overhyped and overvalued. I think that 20-ish is the right price tag for Liliana. So if you do have any Lilianas, I think getting out of them, at $43 is very smart, just because this is going to be continued to be drafted until September. And I think that right now the price value of the Eldritch Moon is quite high, so you can easily get out of this card and then make your money back or invest back into Lilianas when they hit their 20. And basically just, that's the safe route in my opinion. I think one of the other reasons why Liliana are going up in value is because of the Pro Tour. People don't understand nowadays with the professional scene of the Pro Tour, we have teams that basically just try to build every combination possible, the gauntlet, and they spend like 16 hours a day leading up to the Pro Tour just testing. And so a lot of these teams need playsets after playsets after playsets of Lilianas. Yeah, some of them probably do proxy, but they want to make sure they also have the stock, the inventory to make sure that all their teammates have like a playset of the card if they decide to run this specific deck at the Pro Tour. I think that this is going to be a very popular choice at the Pro Tour, but it did get crushed by the company decks, so keep that in mind. So the other version of these Liliana decks is going to be this Black-White Angel control, which runs the Bruna and the Gisela. I think this is the only shell for Gisela, and we've seen the price go down to $17 for Gisela. So that one I don't feel bad about telling people to get out of. She is seeing more play than I expected. I just thought this card would be so irrelevant, but I think that Bruna is the right place for the Gisela, because Bruna gives Gisela a little bit of so it turns into Brazella is what it turns into, and it turns into a 9/10. So you're basically a 7 mana creature for a 9/10 flying first strike, vigilance, lifelink, and your opponent can't cast spells that convert mana cost 3 or less. So it shuts down a lot of company still slides through, but any other of these early base decks get completely locked out by the Bruna and the Gisela once it comes back. There is answers to this. Kalitas is actually a good answer to Gisela's, because then you can just Grasp of Darkness it and then it's gone forever. But these decks are just trying to control the board, and that is their finisher of choice is going to be the Brazella. So 4 Grasp of Darknesses, 4 Languishes here. They're trying everything possible to compete with the Collected Company decks. I think that the huge thing is Transgress probably needs to go main board. I 100% guarantee they bring these in with this Collected Company, and when Collected Company is 45% of the metagame, I think Transgress needs to be in. So we could see one more spike in Languish. I don't think there's really anything else that you should invest in. I think Howled Moonlight, again, they're trying to compete with these Collected Company decks, and Howled Moonlight's kind of awkward actually versus Coco, because it only hits Coco. It doesn't really hit anything else out of the deck, and they can just cantrip it away. But if they're playing Howled Moonlight, these decks just end up waiting till 7 mana to Coco and Spell Queller at the same time. So anyway, Howled Moonlight, though, is a card I do want to talk about because I've been playing it in Modern. Right now, the Modern breakdown and we'll look at that in just a second, has so many things that just cheat in cards. That we have Nahiri Jeskai. We have so Nahiri Jeskai tries to cheat in Emrakul. Then we have Living End decks that try to cheat in Living End. We have dredge decks that try to cheat in dredge. We have a few decks that try to go like the token-based strategies, and then we have Through the Breach that tries to, or Angorio's Vengeance type decks that try to cheat in these early Primeval Titans. So Howled Moonlight, I think, is really effective versus all of those. The ones that it doesn't do well against is like Infect, Burn, and Zoicide, which do make up a huge, and Jund, that make up a huge part of the metagame. But basically, I think the Howled Moonlight might be the new Rest in Peace or Stony Silence type card, as just one of these sideboard cards that starts off being very, very under like dollar or 50 cents. I got into Stony Silences at 50 cents and Rest in Pieces at very, very low too, and now they've gone up in value. We could at rotation see Howled Moonlight go down to that 50-cent mark. I think that's the time you actually invest in the Howled Moonlight. And it seems like that Modern, if it continues this trend, Howled Moonlight is a great answer to all of these type of decks that... Oh, it also works against company decks. There's another card in Modern that it works against. So I think that this is one you should start trying to pick up at rotation, and when it drops to its bulk price or its lowest price, just wait till it flatlines down, and then that's the time to invest. I like to invest in cards once you see that very first little uptick. So it goes down, flat, and then we see that very first like 10-cent increase. That's when I pull the trigger on that, like the Howled Moonlights. So I think that going into the Pro Tour, these decks will probably see a lot of play. I'd love to see a red deck out of nowhere start to compete, but I think that Bant Company or the company decks just have too much value. Reflector Mage is just so hard for aggro decks to compete with, and now Spell Queller is also just really tough for any early base deck to do anything against. So in fact, I don't think you see the color red anywhere until this Grixis control deck, which did not run Liliana, and I don't think there was any Lilianas in the sideboard too. So this Grixis control deck is just back to the Jace, Vryn's Prodigy, and the Goblin Dark Dweller, and Pine Crondalar. Yeah, I love this strategy a lot because they're all just value creatures, and then just runs a lot of these early removal spells. This is kind of very similar to the old school Jeskai Black deck that competed with the Siege Rhino decks back in the day. Just a ton of removal spells that you try to get advantage out of, and then use your finisher of the Chandra Flamecaller, or just like cards like Dragonlord Silumgar or Goblin Dark Dwellers to beat them down. So I am a fan of these decks. I don't know how well they actually work against company decks, and they are very good against the other control decks though, because everything here is just pure value, and they actually will probably end up bringing in a lot of these other value-based cards against the control-based decks like the Obnixilis and the Dragonlord Silumgar and the Kolaghan's Commands, and then take out some of these removal spells that are quite irrelevant. So anyway, that was the first time Red even had a showing there, and then in the top 32 there wasn't any other Red whatsoever. So poor Red. The weakest card by far. Mono White Humans only had one in the top 32. Yeah, that's actually disappointing as well. And I don't think Spirits had one or two as well. See what this big white deck was. Just, well, it is big white. It's kind of like, yeah, Throbbing Inspector, Neither White Orchid into Archangel, and Eldritch Displacer, Secure the Waste. Okay, yep, it is. It's just trying to play a lot of value-based creatures. Yeah, don't know how well that can compete against Bant, though. Seems very vulnerable to Bant decks. Anyway, so that's kind of the standard breakdown. Just be watching keep your ears open for decks that are... I'll try to see if I can get any scoop on... The teams nowadays like to keep their... kind of their lips tight. They don't like to let any secrets out of what deck they're playing at the Pro Tour. So it's the metagame, though. The metagame is, do you run Bant Company? Is it just clearly the best deck? There will be a lot of people that said, okay, put up the numbers. If you can't beat them, join them. And so a vast majority of people will be playing that. Then there might be some players that will play the deck that has the best chance of beating Bant Company. I think that is white and black Languish decks. Then there might be some people that play the C deck, or the deck that beats the Languish decks. And then hopefully they just think that the most of their matchups they'll be facing will be the Languish-based decks, and then they can just farm those out and hopefully get to the top 8 with that, and then be able to beat those out. So that's kind of the metagame. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. We might just see an archetype come out of nowhere that no one's actually found. We didn't see any Thought-Knot Seer type decks, or even Eldrazi Displacer decks were really, really low. And last time Bat Company got kind of big, we saw these like 4-color company decks that tried to compete, outvalue those company type strategies. So we'll have to wait and see what ends up happening. Keep your, again, the best thing is day number 1 on the Pro Tour. Just try to get ahead of the metagame breakdown. Videos that actually get a lot of camera time. So if there's like a Crush deck or a similar deck, if there is a focal piece that people are like, oh, I want to build that deck, those usually go up in value as well. Last thing I want to talk about, I know we're at 24 minutes, but I thought I might as well talk about this too. I had a free Pro Trader MTG Price. I think they gave me a free one just because I do market videos. This isn't a service I actually subscribe to. I don't know if I really care about paying money for a service like this, but I still do get their emails, and I thought this was quite interesting from MTG Price today. Of all of these, what they do is this price change here, so daily price change and this daily stock change, which is very relevant because it's showing that people actually bought these cards. So we've had a lot of discussion about the reserve list and people actually starting to buy up reserve list cards that don't see any play just because the supply is so low of them. Now we're starting to see a lot of these 8th edition cards, 8th, 9th, 10th, Mirrodin, and the Kamigawa block starting to see buyouts just because the supply of these are very, very low. Kamigawa was one of those sets that was, I think a lot of people, there was a mass exodus around that time. People did not like Kamigawa block, and Standard was quite stale during that time period. I remember that, I can't remember when Magic hit its like plateau, but it was around this time period. So comparison to sets of today, I think the 8th edition especially, there's just not very many of them out, and we've just seen these kind of like tier 3 type strategies go crazy in price. And a lot of these are actually commander type cards. Just a ton of stock changes, 62 to 11 of cards like Vernal Bloom, which is a very, very popular commander card and whatnot. So check this out. Just these are not any sort of reserve list, so they can be reprinted at any time. But these are I think the next targets, of the most recent targets for these type buyouts. So if you have any 8th edition cards, I definitely check them out. And I mean, these cards were just like, look at these. These are a lot of these are uncommons that are now up to like $4.42, $2.17. Even Hypnotic Spectre, that's crazy, going up in value. So yeah, just be aware of that is happening, that we're starting to see people targeting even these lower supply modern legal type sets. And yep, that's that. I hope you enjoyed the new Market Monday. Sorry that this kind of got squished over here. I'll have to get some better formatting for the Market Monday. But again, I think that the best advice that I can say right now is just to Day one, that's the time to pull the trigger on any of those decks that are starting to have that like start of a 4-0 start or a 5-0 start and get a lot of camera time. And you'll start to know what the teams are playing. The teams like the Channel Fireball or Pantheon type teams, they're going to, at least one of them is going to do well. They all play the same deck, like John Finkel's team, they all play the same deck. Owen Turnwell deck, if you can get their deck list right off the bat, I assume one of them will do quite well. And even if it's not a day one, a lot of camera time or whatnot, usually day two, one of them squeaks into the top 16 or top 8, and that's the time to pull the trigger on those type of cards. Anyway, lastly, not Oath or Dragons. You missed the boat on Oath or Dragons. There's just not a big window to invest in those cards. So I think that should continue, especially if there's an Oath or a Dragons card that does well at the Pro Tour. Get out of it. There's not enough time to really spark a growth in that particular card. Anyway, this has been Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thanks for watching.